Good morning, Anka. How are you?
Good morning, I'm well. How are you?
Thanks. So, a question I know that we're both often asked is like, we see clients and they say, I really want to achieve X, Y, and Z, but we can see there's a stuckness. Sometimes I call it ambiguously stuck. They want to move forward, but they can't. And when we start to look deeper at what's going on for them, I find a couple of things that are helpful. One is, what will getting that, whatever it is, give you? What's that feeling? And then to translate that feeling, it'll give me joy, it'll give me happiness, it'll give me meaning in my life. To translate that and say a goal is not a place to get to,
Hmm.
it's a place to come from. So if I think that meeting someone will, and I'll be in a meaningful relationship will give me happiness, the secret is really to start showing up happy and fulfilled and in contribution. And that will attract, in fact, what I want. What are some of the ways that you see that people challenge and are challenged by expressing a strong desire and unable to take that first step?
Hmm.
How does it show up for you in your work?
Well, say it all the time. And I think the one thing that I keep saying to people is like, remember that's part of the process. There's nothing wrong with you. Like
Beautiful.
that sense of, I don't know, like this way, that way, I really want to, but I don't like get myself to actually take action. It's it's really normal. It's a normal part of the creative process because there is that because creative like and that's the thing is if you build a business that is a creative process. You're creating something new and there is no oh just follow that little do one step and the next and everything's laid out for you. Well, you get a job for that or you buy a franchise and even there you probably don't get that. So there is that sense of well you're not going to know which steps right always. So and sometimes well, there's usually a phase. You have an idea, and then there's this initial phase. I call it the exploration phase, when you just potter around, when you just and you buy a course here, and you watch a webinar there, and you learn something over here, and you go, oh God, I'm scattered. I don't do anything, right? And I think what I would like to people to remember that creativity doesn't always equal output, right? Allow yourself that space to digest an idea, and because there's usually a lot of pieces involved, and when there's something, and Jim Quick, I literally posted about this the other day. Jim Quick, he's all about how the brain works and teaching people to learn and memorize better. And he says, well, motivation is only half the battle. A confused mind doesn't act.
So
Right,
that's
and
like,
that's really what I see all the time is when you're still in that place where you like exploring something new and everything's new and you're like, I don't know, like this or that, and it's all too much. What if you just allowed yourself and you realize, well, that you're in that exploration phase? Don't expect yourself to produce spot on, right, perfect output yet. And
right.
I got to see that in my sewing business, like really clearly. When I would have I'd have a dress that I put together for a fitting, and then it was just sort of hanging there, and I'd watch myself, and I'm like, oh, I really need to finish that dress, but I just can't get myself to do it. Why? There was nothing obviously wrong with with either the project or the client or anything. And I wonder why I just can't get now. I really should finish that dress. And then I'd be watching, I'd be looking at the thing and can't get myself to start making until and there was always that moment where you go, because deep down there was something that wasn't clear. And sometimes it was like, I'm a bit short on lining fabric. How am I going to make it so that, your mind inside is still processing? You're not ready to, I know now and I'm off, right? And so all I'm saying is just relax into that and allow your mind, allow yourself that exploration time and don't push for output too soon.
Right. I love that. I love that. that what we were talking about, that ambiguity in the stuckness. Somebody showed me yesterday. She said, "This is what I think linear looks like,
Yeah.
up and down. It's not like that." And the other thing, the other piece, other than a goal is a place to come from, the other piece to that is, what's the leverage? What can you gain by taking that first step once you have gotten clarity? And what will you gain rather than not what will you lose? So when in my field with relationships, it's often children can be leverage. What will you gain in your relationship with your children? What will you gain in the relationship with your partner by doing these actions? So what I try and do then is separate out the emotion. I see this is hard. You feel sad or anxious or fearful, and separate that from the action. I had a client yesterday who was trying to repair a relationship with her daughters, and she could come to an action step to take, but she said to me, "But I feel very anxious about it. I will do it," she said, "but I'm not complete in my heart about it." And that's okay. As you say, it's all okay when you're in the exploratory parts and when you're trying to get clear, not to push yourself. Why does it seem so clear for everyone else and it's not clear for me? Just to allow it to come up and sit with it quietly, make space for it, and the clarity will come.
Absolutely.
And then the next step will come if you chunk it down into small pieces.
See, and that is exactly where I was going to go next. And I love how that, I mean, it's as always fascinating how the same thing applies to both of our work. And the clarity, and then take the next step, small step. And I think people quite often misjudge how small that step can and should be, right? Because usually, I always say when it feels hard, you're skipping steps, right? So because if your next step is like talking in online tech, context, that if your next step is, set up my lead magnet, well, there's like 50 steps in there. So if this stuff is new to you, then that tiny step will trip you up because it isn't a small step. Right. So the first step is like, okay, what can I offer in return for somebody else's email address? Now let's create that. That's your step. Or even like put together the outline. That's the step. And I really got to see that also with my dogs. And I remember getting like a little, for God's sake, all I want you is to just stay there. They're kind of like really I go somewhere, they come along, and I feel like, well, I wanted to teach them to sort of stay there for a bit, and it wasn't easy. They just like wouldn't get it. And I'm like, and then I saw somebody explain how that actually works. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I've lumped 10 steps in one, because I was just like, you just stay here for a second and I'll be back in a minute, whereas like for the dog, that was like, yeah, to really teach the dog, you had to split that up in 10 steps. And I didn't realize, I didn't see those 10 steps. I thought what I did was a small step, but it wasn't.
Right. I often say, if it's something that makes you smile because it's so small, can you want to take your health under control? Can you march in place for 5 minutes? Oh, yeah, I can do that. And then we'll step it up. And the other piece that I'd like to offer as we come to the end is to not be attached to the outcome. So if I go back to this client yesterday who was going to take this very small step, and then not talk about, but what if my daughter doesn't respond? What if? We're just going to reach out in this small step and let it go for now, and feel honored and fantastic with ourselves that, wow, you did that small step. There's something that you want from the other. Very often as I want to change the other, you can't change the other, but whatever it is you want, you might want to offer. And that's what I said to her. I said, this is what you want from your daughters. Let's see if you can offer that in a small, tiny step. That, yeah, I can do that. That makes me smile.
That's great. I love that.
That's what I'd offer. Any closing words?
I don't know, my closing words are always the same. Just give yourself some slack.
Great. I would say, remember that there's nothing that harshness will do that loving kindness won't do better. Don't beat yourself up. You're human. Be kind, be loving, and then you are able to take those next steps. Anka, thanks again for being here today. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.
Bye.